Thanks everybody for joining us today, and thanks to Flowcarbon for hosting this event. My name's Evan Thomas. I am the CEO and founder of Virridy, which is a company that specializes in bringing global water security to the carbon finance markets. So we all know climate change is here. We're seeing and feeling it almost every day, and the first thing that most of us notice is what climate change is doing to our water. Dry places are getting drier, with droughts driving crop failure, livestock death, and displacement of people. And wet places are getting wetter, with flooding destroying communities and contaminating water supplies. Because of what we've done, both through causing climate change as well as acting like water is free, we can't count on water being where we need it, when we need it anymore. I've been working with water for about 20 years in places where it can be very expensive and complicated to make sure people have clean water. My early career was as an aerospace engineer at NASA in Houston, where I designed water recycling systems for astronauts in space. This is pictures taken on what NASA calls the Weightless Wonder. It's an airplane. I don't work there anymore, so I can call it by its real name, the Vomit Comet. This is how we test technologies in reduced gravity before sending them up into space. Astronauts on the space station need the same things we need: food, air, shelter, and of course clean water. But water is incompressible. It's very heavy, and you can't pack it down into scuba tanks. It costs about $20,000 per liter of water we send up to the space station. So instead, we recycle it. Every day we take the respiration and the perspiration and of course the urination of every astronaut on the space station and recycle it back into clean drinking water. So that cup of coffee you're enjoying today was also your buddy's cup of coffee yesterday. This is cheaper than sending up clean water, but add up all the engineering, it still costs thousands of dollars per cup of water the astronauts have on the station. Back here on Earth, we also value water. We need it to drink, for our food, our forests, our rivers, our animals, but we act like it's free until it's not there anymore. And the water sector is contributing to climate change. The water sector is 10% of global emissions. That's more than the airline and shipping industries combined. And yet, even with that massive impact on the planet, over 4 billion people still lack access to safe drinking water. And the people facing the impacts of climate change on their water live in the places least responsible for climate change. One of the challenges with water is that it's hyper-local. An acre-foot of irrigation water in Colorado, where I live, bears almost no relation to a liter of drinking water in Rwanda. Water is hard to invest in, and it's hard to pool a risk. But we actually can invest in local water solutions using the global climate markets. Contracted by WaterAid, the Voluntary Carbon Markets Integrity Initiative, the Gold Standard, and HSBC, our team produced a report earlier this year that looked at the global potential to link water programs with the voluntary carbon markets. We found that over 1.6 billion tons, 1.6 billion carbon credits could be developed every year in the water sector, from projects including rice cultivation, reduced water treatment energy demand, providing clean water in low and middle income communities, and restoring watersheds in high income communities. Our team at Virridy is leading the integration of the carbon markets with water security solutions. We implement projects with communities, monitor these projects with our technologies, calculate environmental benefits to earn carbon credits that then reinvest in these local water solutions. I want to dive into just 2 examples of how we apply these methodologies globally. First, providing clean drinking water in low-income communities. This is a methodology my team and I first wrote back in 2007, and since then we and others have developed and brought to market over 45 million carbon credits and reached millions of people with clean drinking water services. These carbon credits are calculated based on avoiding the need to boil your drinking water with wood and fossil fuels. Working with partners, we're on track to reach several million more people with clean drinking water in Rwanda, Kenya, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo over the next few years. In Rwanda, our team is the water service provider already for 350,000 kids in primary and secondary schools, and over the next 2 years, we'll reach over 600,000 kids and generate 200,000 credits per year every year in Rwanda. In northern Kenya, we're partnered with the Millennium Water Alliance and local governments to repair and maintain groundwater pumps reaching over 1 million people with emergency water access during peak drought. In this project, the capital expenses of those big pumps are paid for by USAID, the Swiss government, and the Coca-Cola Foundation, while carbon revenue is used to pay for sustainable and accountable operations and maintenance services. With LifeStraw, we're working in Western Kenya on another school-based program to reach over 400,000 additional kids with clean water in the next 2 years. And finally, in the Congo, we're partnered with the Eastern Congo Initiative and their local social enterprise called the Sili to support the expansion of their piped chlorinated drinking water system to reach an additional 500,000 people in the Congo over the next 2 years. We use our sensor technologies to directly monitor these programs. We're already monitoring millions of people's water supplies in East Africa. This data is used not only to operate these programs and trigger things like water pump repairs, but also provide the crucial evidence needed to generate high-quality carbon credits that pay for these ongoing life-saving water services. I'm going to pivot to the United States. Here in the US, we also have water problems. Improving river water quality is a challenge. Half of America's rivers do not meet the Clean Drinking Water Act and the Clean Water Act standards today. Under the Clean Water Act, communities can either upgrade water and wastewater treatment plants to try to meet the Clean Water Act standards, or they can restore rivers and watersheds. However, technologies haven't really been available to monitor and manage watersheds as easily as putting a sensor at the end of a wastewater treatment plant. So regulators and utilities would often rather build that big, energy-intensive water treatment infrastructure because they can easily monitor and manage it. Our team at Virridy has developed a methodology that incentivizes nature-based solutions for water quality and avoids the construction and operation of that big, electricity-intensive infrastructure. Nationwide, we estimate that using these methodologies, over 34 million tons of CO2 could be avoided or sequestered every year in the United States. Our team, which includes the University of Colorado Boulder and Colorado State University, has been working with policymakers and implementers, and we've developed new legislation at the state level in Colorado, as well as received directed congressional funding for this work. A new law in Colorado puts our team in direct partnership with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment to accelerate and scale these carbon credit generating watershed solutions. And national funding from Congress, NASA, and the National Science Foundation have accelerated the technology development needed to monitor these programs. I want to share just 2 examples of these projects. This is the Yampa River in Colorado. To comply with new standards for phosphorus and nitrogen on the upper Yampa, the Morrison Creek Water and Sanitation District has begun the design of a very expensive and energy-intensive reverse osmosis system. Meanwhile, downstream, the city of Steamboat Springs might have to build a cooling tower to reduce the temperature of their discharge into the Yampa. These projects will cost tens of millions of dollars to develop and emit tens of thousands of tons of CO2 into the air. Instead, our team, along with the local nonprofit Friends of the Yampa, has developed a USDA-funded watershed restoration program that will pay farmers to do simple things like off-channel livestock watering, irrigation upgrades, and stream bank erosion control. If we do this, we not only clean up the water, we restore the lands, but we also avoid over 20,000 tons of CO2 emitted to the atmosphere from conventional water treatment. In another example, our team is working with the Madison Metropolitan Sewage District to quantify the climate benefits of their nature-based solution for phosphorus, which is designed to reduce phosphorus loading ultimately into the Great Lakes. Similar to Colorado and the Upper Yampa, by working with agricultural producers, Madison can avoid the construction of a reverse osmosis plant and pay farmers to reduce phosphorus loading into the rivers. We estimate that locking in this program can avoid over 70,000 tons of CO2 emissions in the United States. To support these projects, our technologies, which we've developed with the National Science Foundation, are designed to help monitor and manage river water quality and ensure that stakeholders from regulators to utilities, citizens to carbon credit buyers can have confidence that watershed programs are working. Our sensors monitor in-stream water quality, and when we combine that with a network of sensors across the river, other geospatial and land management data, and a machine learning model, we can actually monitor and attribute changes in water quality to changes in land management practices. We've already sold millions of dollars of our carbon credits. Among our buyers is Mortenson Construction, which is the biggest installer of renewable energy in North America. We're now building a global portfolio of high-quality, water-focused carbon projects. We call it the Watermark Carbon Pool, and it combines a wide range of water projects from Rwanda, Kenya, Madison, Wisconsin, Steamboat Springs, Colorado, around the world, and brings these local water projects into a global climate market. In the coming years, we're going to be directly restoring watersheds in the United States while reaching millions of people with clean drinking water in Africa. At Virridy, we are pioneering climate and finance solutions to secure our water future. Please read our report. You can get the QR code there. We also have hard copies out in the lobby, and get in touch with us. We'd love to partner with any of you. And I think we actually have a few minutes for questions if there are any. Thank you. I don't know if we have a host, so it might just be me if anybody has any questions. Yes, please.
To learn a little bit more about how you quantify and qualify processes, i.e., are you doing very local projects or are you doing, what's the average size of the project that you do?
Yeah, so our drinking water programs in low-income communities, in order to justify the transaction costs, the overhead, the audits, the sensor technologies, we have to be reaching about 500,000 people in a program every year. So these aren't ultra small projects. Our partners are relatively large nonprofits and social enterprises. Each of them are adding in maybe 50 to 100,000 new beneficiaries every year. In total today across our portfolio, we're reaching about 2 million people with clean water services. We can generate between 0.1 and 0.2 tons or 0.1 and 0.2 carbon credits per person per year using these methodologies. It depends on the programs, it depends on the geography, there's a lot of other different variables that go in. And then of course there's the cost side. Some of these projects are investable purely on carbon revenue, such as our program in Rwanda. Others, the capital costs are very expensive, and we mix philanthropic and government funding for the capital expenses, and then carbon pays for the ongoing operating expenses of those programs.
And so, second question, so who's getting the financial benefits of the sale of the credit?
Yeah, so it's a great question. You know, what is the benefit sharing with water projects? With a lot of nature-based projects, so the question was, who's getting the financial benefit of the carbon? With a lot of nature-based projects and a lot of the criticism we've seen in the VCM over the past couple of years, these projects aren't that expensive to protect an area of tree stand or a forest. And the benefits aren't accruing to local communities who live there and work there. Water projects are different. Water projects are costly to deliver. So I'm actually a water guy. I'm a water and sanitation guy for most of my career. The problem with WASH programs is that there is no money to pay for operation and maintenance. And so about half of water and sanitation projects that are installed in developing communities every year, whether it's from your local NGO, your Rotary Club, all the way up to the World Bank or USAID, they fail within the first 18 months. The carbon revenue pays for that operation and maintenance. Depending on the nature of the program, the cost per credit can be anywhere from $10 to over $100 if you're looking at purely in terms of the carbon economics. The benefit is between 90% and well above that back to the community in terms of the water service. So the short answer is there is no cash transfer back to the local communities. The communities are the beneficiary of the water service, which in every one of these projects is a direct partnership with either national or local government or both. Yes, please.
Hi, thanks for that. The carbon credit aspect of water and environmental services is interesting. I'm curious how you see the market developing in terms of finance, whether you think you'll continue to rely primarily on carbon credits as an ecosystem crediting service, or you see a development of a standalone kind of water quality credit of something like that, like we're also seeing in biodiversity credits developing now as well.
Yeah, water credits have been proposed Often, and they've been tried a bunch of times. The gold standard actually has what they call a water benefit certificate or a water benefit credit. They created this because of the same idea you just articulated, already more than 10 years ago. There have been no projects registered with the water benefit certificate and 45 million credits issued using the carbon credit methodology. The reason is there's a market. There's a market for carbon credits. There's a base price. There's meetings like this. There are buyers. There are investors. Water credits take water back into that hyper-local environment where you have one seller and you have one buyer. The transaction has a huge amount of friction. It's grant-making by another name in a lot of cases, and it's not really scalable. Again, transacting irrigation water in Colorado has no bearing on drinking water in East Africa. The carbon credit is interchangeable. The carbon credit has these co-benefits, so we get well above, a base market price. We're selling our credits for $40 now. That's considerably above your average nature-based solution credit price because our buyers want the carbon credit, but they also want that water benefit. They want that water co-benefit. So from a marketing perspective, our target are buyers who want the water benefit. They don't just want any carbon credit. They want the fact that these credits represent watershed restoration, irrigation upgrades, drinking water for people that don't have access to basic wash services. When others and we have tried to create a bespoke water credit, it doesn't scale. Any other questions?
Oh. Thank you so much for the insights. I would like to better understand the methodologies you apply to ensure your projects actually offset the amount of carbon you credit, and how you mitigate the risk of the projects not having the quality you believe to have.
Sure. So in low-income communities, the methodology is with the gold standard. It's actually a derivative of an old CDM methodology that we wrote back in 2007. What we're crediting is the fact that there are billions of people in the world that drink dirty water, and there is a clear financing gap in providing wash services, water and sanitation services. When people have no formalized service, they will often boil their water with wood or fossil fuels. The gold standard and also Verra and the old CDM methodology credit that avoided demand for boiling. So what we have to monitor in the methodology is that there was no drinking water service before the program was implemented or wasn't forthcoming, that the water was dirty, microbially contaminated in particular, and that we clean up the water. So there's a huge amount of water quality testing that we do. And we actually go well beyond the sampling frame that the gold standard requires. We test all water sources and all water treated in every place where we're delivering clean water. That's the primary thing that we have to monitor on an ongoing basis. There's a lot of other baseline parameters we monitor or that we have to establish, like what fuel mix was already there, what fraction of the wood is non-renewable, that there aren't other forthcoming water services. And then the other piece is technology. So in things like water pumps, we have satellite-connected sensors that are monitoring these pumps. And this is out in the middle of nowhere. This is northern Kenya, very sparsely populated, very arid. You're 5-6 hours of driving between water pumps. So we have satellite-connected sensors on these pumps that are monitoring the function and monitoring the use. When we see that a pump is broken, that triggers a repair. So we actually deploy technicians to go repair that pump. But the data from that sensor is also the audit trail for our auditors of how many carbon credits we've earned. In the US, it's slightly different. In the US, the nature-based solution is cleaning up the water. So we have to monitor that that solution is happening, that water quality is improving, that land management practices are happening. As that happens, these projects are regulated. They're regulated by the EPA and state-level regulators who issue permits to wastewater dischargers who say, okay, you have to build a reverse osmosis plant or you don't have to build a reverse osmosis plant if this nature-based alternative is working. In that case, the credits are based on avoided electricity use, which is codified in that permit. We really didn't build and we really didn't operate the reverse osmosis plant. Please. Yeah, so the question is, how do you ensure additionality? And I think you mean for the US watershed programs, or just broadly. Water quality trading has been allowed by the EPA for about 20 years. Water quality trading is what I described, where a regulated wastewater utility either has to build infrastructure to treat water to meet the Clean Water Act, or they can do a watershed solution. The problem is it's almost de minimis in the United States. There's really only a small handful of examples of watershed programs and nature-based programs in the US. I think the EPA lists like 20 programs nationwide. Less than $50 million a year goes into these. The water treatment industry in the US is $30 billion a year. So it's a tiny little fraction. The additionality is established based on the premise and the demonstration that these projects were not happening. So in the examples I gave you, these wastewater discharges along the Yampa, they're already being obligated by the regulator to build infrastructure. We're intervening and proposing this alternative. Carbon comes in to pay for the nature-based solution before the permit is issued. It starts to get into some of this nuance about how the regulators work, but regulators don't want to permit something that's not working, and utilities aren't going to pay for something that they don't have a permit. We can come in and use private capital using the carbon markets to start the watershed program, demonstrate that it is working and that it's on track before a permit is issued, get that permit issued, and lock in that alternative. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, thanks. I guess I'll close with this. The water credit is actually an avoidance credit, mostly in another market. So if you're investing in water, here, it's more an open market. But in Europe, the water markets are going to go through the roof because it's actually a compulsory market. And so the way that it's counted over there, and I'd like you to comment on it, is completely different. Here, you have to attach it to a carbon credit because it's additionality is the main concept. But in water is avoidance. So you're avoiding PFAS, and you're avoiding all sorts of toxics that are being released. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, so I think, are you combining a couple things there? So there's the compliance carbon markets in Europe. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes. Well, actually, compliance regulations.
Yeah, so those projects have to happen in Europe. So the projects I described aren't eligible on the EU ETS, but the concepts can be. Watershed solutions can be, watershed and drinking water solutions can be applicable in Europe. Europe doesn't have the Clean Water Act. They regulate non-point source pollution and point source pollution differently than we do. This is a bit of a niche in the US that we focused on, primarily because of this question of additionality. It's a clear opportunity that is not actually being adopted by almost anybody in the US. So it still is going to depend on the voluntary markets wanting to invest in these watershed solutions. And unfortunately, there's no nature-based solution for PFAS, but somebody will make a Nobel Prize and $1 trillion if they figure that out at the same time.
We have time for one more quick question.
Hi, this is Maria from Itaú, the Brazilian bank. I was wondering if you've done any work on water conservation for agriculture, because with the deforestation in the Amazon, we're having a huge problem with the rivers in the Amazon, and that affects the food production in Brazil.
Yeah, so water conservation or volumetric water accounting has been a major focus of things like water crediting in the past couple of years. There's something called the CEO Water Mandate, which focuses on the water footprints of corporations. There's an organization called the Bonneville Environmental Fund that focuses on generating volumetric water credits that corporations or municipalities can pay for. The problem, again, is that it ends up being hyper-local. Volumetric water matters in your geography. What we are trying to innovate is a way to export that benefit and trade that benefit in a global market. Thanks for your time. We're here all day. We'd love to meet more of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Evan.